And we are back. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out. We see a lot of people hanging out with us on Twitter tonight. So thank you so much. Please make sure to share it. Get some more friends joining us. If you're with us here on the YouTube channel, we can see your comments. For some reason, we can't see your comments on Twitter, but head on over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@the SSW Network. Click on this video. Join us. Get into the chat. We got a lot going on. We're about to get into the two most controversial movies of the sequel trilogy. When people talk about why the sequels are controversial, this is where the shit hits the fan, if you will. Nick, the next movie was a little film called The Last Jedi.
I've heard of it.
You may have heard of it. Again, as we said earlier, when we asked our fans, our thousands of Twitter followers, what is your favorite Star Wars sequel trilogy film? Overwhelmingly, 60% to 60% said The Last Jedi, followed closely, not closely at all, but followed about 50% of them. The Force Awakens came in, and then Rise of Skywalker came in dead last. So The Last Jedi is an interesting movie. I'll also add, Nick, that the critic score on Rotten Tomatoes, 91%, which is a little bit behind Force Awakens. But the audience score is 41%. And as we all know, part of that is inevitably part of some score bombing. But it's also, let's be real, and this is where we're going to start to get a little bit more real. I mean, when you talk to the average fan, again, let's go back to that guy who still hasn't gotten over the prequels, that guy who still thinks Jar Jar Binks is not for him, the guy who still thinks that George Lucas may or may not have raped his childhood. When you ask them which movie they don't like The Last Jedi. This is the movie that a lot of folks don't love. What do you think of that? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, one, I love that because this is, we talk as Star Wars podcasters, as content creators, we have a lot of times when people want us to rank the movies.
Yep.
You've done a good job of saying, this is my 9th favorite or my 11th favorite, doesn't have to be last, doesn't have to be, whatever it is. Everybody can get a trophy. That's fine. It's like upwards basketball, but Star Wars. But if I'm going to be forced into a corner, if I'm going to have to pick some things, this is where Star Wars has broken down for me since this movie came out. My favorite Star Wars movie is The Empire Strikes Back. I'm of that generation. I'm of that era. It's the movie that I just think top to bottom is a phenomenal movie. Like Mount Rushmore of movies, period. Not because it's a sequel,
not just a great Star Wars movie. It's one of your favorite movies.
Empire, and a couple of other movies. Like right there, top tier. It's my favorite Star Wars movie. But if you ask me what do I think is the best Star Wars movie, it's The Last Jedi.
Yep.
And it's The Last Jedi because of the story it tells, the meta narrative that comes with it, that connects all 7 movies up to this point, bringing in the threads of what Star Wars is, what this is going to be. And I love it. And the fact that people lose their mind over it, there's a couple of things. One, a lot of the people that lose their mind over it, I don't think they know why. Because when you have 5, 10, 30 seconds of a measured conversation where you go, well, here's why I think this, they go, I never thought about that. Little bit of a peek, a little bit of a story. Our good friend Jeff Qualio, who's a patron supporter, who's been a part of live shows and call-ins and all those things, lives here with me in Montgomery, not here in my house, but here in Montgomery, fellow Montgomery, Alabama native. We met because we were extras on the Wonder Years, the TV show, the reboot that shot here for a week a couple of years ago. On the set of that show, waiting in costume line or whatever we were doing, he saw my Star Wars tattoo. He's like, "You like Star Wars?" I was like, "Buddy, you just opened a can of worms." Very quickly, one of the first questions, well, how do you feel about The Last Jedi?
Yeah, there you go.
I told him. And he didn't agree. But within a short span of time, having a conversation, he's like, wow, I've never thought about it that way.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not going to say I turned him around. I'm not some evangelist that is out preaching Last Jedi on the corner of the streets, if only that paid well. But it is that thing that like people hate it, but I think a lot of times people don't know why they hate it.
Right.
They're not sure why
Yep.
they're mad at it. I think that 41 score, between the review bombing and the people who really just haven't taken enough time to think about it, aren't sure why it's there. Because, like you, when I saw it the first time in the theater, I left and I went, what?
Yep.
I don't know. But I took an hour. I texted with a friend of mine and I was like, oh, like it was like time release. Like as time went on, I went, oh shit, this is better than I thought it was.
It took me to my second or third viewing to really dig it, because I walked out of the movie. I remember I walked out of it, and the first thing I said was that was both the best and worst Star Wars movie I'd ever seen, and that was my feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's so many things about that movie that work toward making you feel that way. Not the least of which is Rian Johnson, who has openly said that he when he makes movies, he's out to not subvert expectations, but to sort of change what you think. I want to read this one Rian Johnson quote, because as we know, Mark Hamill fundamentally disagreed with Rian Johnson's characterization of Luke. But as you point out, and you're 100% right, after seeing the movie, he got it. After seeing it play out, he acknowledged why he did it. But Rian said, and the fandom menace, the people who don't like Disney era Star Wars, the people who are consistently fighting against The Last Jedi, always say, well, Rian Johnson would wanted to subvert my expectations. And he may have said that in one form or another, but in an article with Slash Film, he said, I guess the first thing to say is, coming into writing this or any story, the object is not to subvert expectation. The object is not surprise. I think that would lead to some contrived places. The object is drama, and in this case, the object was figuring out a path for each one of these characters where we challenge them and thus learn more about each of them by the end of the movie, which you have to say, whether you like the movie or not, that is something that Rian Johnson did absolutely brilliantly in this movie. He challenged every single character, from Poe to Haldo to Luke to Rey, even to Rose. Challenged them. And look, life is that challenge. And when you are challenged, how you respond, that's your story. And that's what I think he did incredibly well there.
I agree completely. And I think that, when you see a movie like this, when you see, you have expectations. I think certainly we are faced with the change from J.J. Abrams to Rian Johnson. Yep. And you have said it many times, and I'm going to get it wrong if I say it, so you may end up having to correct me. But the reality is, J.J. Abrams, just go ahead and say it. You say it better than I do.
Yeah. No, so my feeling is that J.J. Abrams is a fan of Star Wars movies, and Rian Johnson is a fan of Star Wars stories, which is why, like you, Nick, to me, The Last Jedi, I will probably, if I have 11 Star Wars movies to watch, Last Jedi will probably be number 10 that I'll watch. Maybe number 9. I might watch it before Attack of the Clones. But it's my favorite Star Wars story, because not only does Rian Johnson create this really difficult story. Look, he says it in the trailer.
It's in the trailer. Yep.
This will not go the way you think. And I have to tell you, that phrase goes through my head constantly, all the time. And that's what he did with this movie. The story was not, because, and I think, and I've said this before on the show, so for those of you who are fans, you've heard me say this, but if you're new, welcome. You're going to hear me say this a lot. I didn't like the Last Jedi when I first saw it, because in my head, I had written that movie, because The Force Awakens was so much a carbon copy of A New Hope. I thought for sure it was going to have a training montage. We were going to get more of the Knights of Ren. We were going to get this. We were going to get that. It was going to follow more of an Empire Strikes Back kind of story. And it's funny. There are people who say it follows Empire Strikes Back directly. How? I don't see Empire Strikes Back in that movie literally at all. It is hard for me to find an Empire Strikes Back connection.
I can see some moments of it, and I'll take the contra other side of your devil's avocado, Larry, if you will. If I can be the devil's advocate for a moment, I do see some Empire elements in simply it doesn't end on the most hopeful note. Like, yes, the heroes are still on the ship.
Right.
They're what survives. But it's not, it's not this resounding victory. Like, they got away is what
Right.
happened. So,
But
in that, Empire was more of a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Empire was more of like, oh, wait, Han Solo's gone and these guys are leaving and Luke's hand's gotten cut off. It wasn't as hardcore as that, but it was still not like, ooh, we beat the bad guy. Let's go, celebrate and eat stormtrooper heads or whatever it is that we're going to do.
But you talked about that difference, and I think you're right. And I think, though, that's part of the problem that I had. And I remember talking about this with my neighbor across the street, the guy who I talk about all the time, my friend Adam, who we go to see the movies on Thursday nights, all the big blockbusters. Leave the kids home. We go check out the movies. I remember saying to him, we don't need an episode 9. That movie could have ended right there. It would have, they could have ended the saga with, okay, so that's it. They need to reinvigorate hope. What did C.W. McKay say before? You put something up there on the screen. I want to mention him.
Well, we had this one. He said, seriously, Star Wars said TLJ is very much like Empire Strikes Back. And then TW said, also, I know supplemental, but the line surrounding Luke's farewell and the novelization still lives with me.
TW, you're talking about supplemental material again. We're going to get to that in Rise of Skywalker, dude.
But I do want to bring this up because this was the other part of this, talking about supplemental material, the novelization of The Last Jedi, written by a friend of the show, Jason Fry.
Yep.
In the beginning of that book, the thing that we don't get in this movie is Luke kind of having his, last temptation of Christ moment where he's dreaming about, what if he just got married? What if he just had a family and a life?
What if I stayed with Fletzer and Cammy?
Yeah. What if I had stayed and it hadn't become what it was? And so those things, are out there and float and exist in the ether. Also, TW also said, I grew up with Legends Luke in my head. That movie was a shock to the system. It still moved me to tears after watching it.
Yep. So that's a really interesting point, because of the fact that this scene that I just put up here on the screen, for those of you listening, it's a picture of Luke standing in front of an army, a full line of walkers, and Kylo's ship coming down. This is comic book Luke Skywalker. This is Legends EU Luke Skywalker. I don't care what anybody says. And the people who say that, not my Luke Skywalker, this was your Luke Skywalker, guys. He faced that. I mean, this is the brilliance of Rian Johnson, and
did it while subverting expectations at the exact same time.
Correct. And if you, we'll get to some of the bad and some of the controversy, but the reality is, everything that people say Rian Johnson didn't do, he actually did with this movie. He took his time to get there. He did so much with it. Let's start to move into some of the good, because we've already started talking about it, because obviously for you and I, this is one of our favorite. Is this your number one of the sequels?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is my number one story. I will, if I have to choose one of the 3 to watch, I'm putting in Force Awakens. If you have to pick one of the 3 to watch, which one are you putting in?
And this one.
Really?
Yeah.
So I'm putting in Force Awakens, and I've done that multiple times. I just throw it in, just be like, okay, because it's, you know what? And it's probably because, as you said, it's the least interesting story, so I don't have to pay attention. It's like,
you don't have to pay attention.
I just throw it in. It's there. This movie, I have to focus. But so let's get to some of that. I think the way I've described this movie is it's the most intimate of any of the Star Wars movies, and I think that really comes, and I don't mean in the Reylo sense, and I'm not going to talk Reylo here, because I do feel like the Reylo piece really bent this entire piece of this of the fandom a little bit out of shape, for better or worse. And again, if you saw a Kylo Ren Rey romance, awesome, enjoy it. I did not. And I remember, because Jason Fry was on the show, and I remember talking, we spent a lot of time in depth. If you're checking out the podcast, go back and find the first interview we did with Jason Fry. Jason talks about, I asked him, is there a romance between Kylo and Rey? And he said they had the most intimate connection that you can possibly have. They were in each other's heads. That doesn't mean it's romance. That doesn't mean it's physical. It doesn't mean it's love, but it was a connection that you cannot walk away from. And I think, though, that's why this movie worked, because you had personal decisions. We talked before about The Force Awakens, or rather, we talked a little bit before about how oh, we didn't talk about it. It was actually in the video at the opening where a story is about. Or no, you talked about it. Sorry, I'll just edit this out. My rambling here.
You're fine.
Mark the clock. 1 minute 19 seconds. The concept of story, right? Force Awakens was just a fun story. It was a brainless story. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. But this is a story where Poe has to deal with. He was such a hotshot pilot and so convinced he could beat the First Order that he lost an entire bomber squadron.
But it comes with a cost.
Right. Yep. Haldo had to decide what's the right thing to do. I am a commander in this rebellion. I need to make this ultimate sacrifice. Yep. Luke had to decide, how am I going to help my sister for the last time? So these are personal decisions. And then that great connection between Rey and Kylo, what would become the dyad in the Force, which is one of the weakest parts of the Rise of Skywalker to me.
Hold on, we're not there yet. Hold on.
But the connection between the two of them made for some of the most interesting stories. Again, you know, I showed the clip before of Rey and Finn, but when she talks to Kylo, she rips him apart. Like she's like, you're a monster. You are you are the worst. And she goes at him. And again, it's that kind of one-to-one, person-to-person intimate relationship that you don't see in Star Wars. You don't see people going at that level of really questioning. I mean, the last time I think you could have seen it was maybe in the way Obi-Wan had to deal with Anakin and his fall. It's a similar sort of thing. So, from a good perspective, I really think the story being so intimate. What would you throw out there?
There are a couple of things. I really do love the commentary on the hubris and the fall of the Jedi. You know, Luke, when they're talking, they're in the cave. He's going, look, you know, this isn't all heroes and fancies and unicorns and whatever. And in fact, he says the phrase, what am I supposed to do? Walk out and face down the First Order with my laser sword, which is its own, you know.
That's exactly what he did.
And that's why I was going to say, you put this clip up. That is exactly what he did. And that's what I love about Rian Johnson doing this is he did that, but not in the way anybody had the expectation that he was going to do it. They didn't have the idea that Luke was sitting on a rock, force timing himself across the galaxy to be able to be, you know, a Tupac hologram at Coachella, waiting to distract them so they could get away. Like that wasn't the plan, but Luke says it to Rey, you know, it in the trailer, this isn't going to go the way you think. He's talking to me. He's talking to you. He's talking to all 100%. Of us. And going, look, I know you think these movies are this, but there's more here. It's a bigger story. It's a bigger galaxy.
And that to me is the irony of the fans who don't like it. Is this movie is specifically made for them. This is a movie for people who think they know Luke Skywalker. And at the end of the day, Luke Skywalker, and again, this makes sense as to why Mark Hamill disagreed with it. Because Mark Hamill was one of those guys. Mark Hamill had this vision of what Luke was going to do. And at the end of the day, Luke did it and then some. He created this hope for the galaxy. And look, the people who did not like this Luke Skywalker in this movie, it's probably because they saw themselves. And in fact, that's the reason why I liked this Luke Skywalker in this movie. Because I saw myself. I saw the famous Yoda line. They what is it? They grow to what was it?
They are what we are, what they grow beyond.
Right. You have to pass that on. Correct. And again, and I think much like we talked about before, Rian Johnson understood that the handoff happened in The Force Awakens. There was no need for that crappy meme to we deserved Lando and Luke and Han and Leia. No, we didn't. This story has moved on. And I look at my son and my daughter. I look at my daughter making a Rey costume in 2015 before she saw the movie. This was her Luke Skywalker. And the time had come to pass that on. And Luke Skywalker doing what he did, facing down the First Order with his laser sword to allow his sister and the First Order to make it out alive, plus inspire hope in the galaxy that Leia could not find. Remember, she put out the signal to the galaxy and nobody responded.
Nobody came.
But Broom Boy did. Broom Boy saw it happening. So this was a situation where Luke did, it's probably more powerful than anything he could have done had he actually shown up and fought Snoke face to face.
Correct. Right? And it creates what you see. And again, the meta narrative of the whole thing, not only speaking to us as fans, speaking us, in this universe, but what we had prior was the Jedi, warrior monks. They were generals. They, they led peace. And like, if you go back to the eras like the High Republic, which you and I are not at all versed in, but like they weren't generals then. Like they were counselors, and they were, it was wisdom, and it was this different thing. And as we see those eras and generations shift, they become warrior monks with magic powers and whatever. And something else that we get in this movie that we haven't really talked about is Luke standing in that doorway. And he says, after he has that big conversation with Rey, it's time for the Jedi to end.
Yep.
Now, he doesn't mean that it's time for Force users to end. It's about the dogma. It's about the rules and the structure. And so what he's able to do is not go out and physically fight Kylo Ren and cut another hand off, because Star Wars loves to cut a hand off. He's able to go out there and go, you think it's all about fighting and swordplay and being a big badass warrior. I'm here to tell you it's about distracting you so that the people that are going to continue to lead this rebellion can get away. It's the pacifist approach. Luke Skywalker's going, I'm going to do, I'm going to get into good trouble, to borrow a phrase from John Lewis. He's going to go, I'm going to distract you. I'm going to brush my shoulder off, and you can shoot at me and be mad all you want. But the reality is, my
family's getting away.
But I've got your attention, and the person who's going to restart this thing and is going to focus on the Broom Boys and the people who are Force sensitive. Maz Kanata herself in this movie, she says, I'm no Jedi, but I know the Force. I take that to mean she can use the Force. I don't take that to just mean, oh, I've read about it a bunch. But it's a different story because it expands the world and the universe. The Force wasn't just people who were selected to be a part of this special monastic order, who weren't supposed to have attachments and weren't supposed to be in love and weren't supposed to do this. Other people could do it too. And you see it in a kid sweeping up a horse stall at the end of the movie. He walks down the steps and without thinking about it, puts his hand out and the broom shoots into his hand. That's where the power in this movie.
100%. And you also, you mentioned at the top of this section about how it talks about the hubris. To me, this is the only of these three movies, the only one of these three movies that has any connection to the prequels. It's the only one that says Darth Sidious. It's the only one that alludes to what George was trying to do with the prequels, was to show, hey, if you lose sight of what you are, this is what happens. And yeah, you could argue all day. I mean, if we get into a little bit of the bad, the humor, your mama joke. Look, anybody who doesn't like that joke and complain and claims to be a prequel fan is 100% full of shit, because Jar Jar Binks stepping in EOP crap and making a joke about it and the fart joke at the freaking pod race is no different than your mama joke. So if you didn't like it, it's because you didn't like it and you were trying to find a reason to not like it. I will talk about a couple things that I didn't like. And again, we could do this. I can do this all day.
I actually have one more quick thing.
Please.
Like, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it.
No, let's go for it.
This was the movie that Kylo Ren clicked for me. The first movie in Force Awakens, I was like, okay, whatever, bad guy mask, Han Solo's kid, I get it. The passion, and I attribute a lot of this to Adam Driver and his acting and what he put into this character. Like, I reached a point where I was like, oh, he annoyed me at first, but like, not that I'm on his side, but I get it. Like, he became more compelling, even in his own right. The things that he was trying to accomplish, feeling, overlooked by Snoke. You know, the moments where he's, you know, dealing with all of that, wanting to take his place, take over, become the supreme leader. Like, there was a turning point for me in this movie with Kylo Ren.
Well, I mean, even I think there's so much to be said for how great why can't I think of his name? The guy who plays Snoke. Um
Oh, mm-hmm.
it's gonna kill me. I'm gonna look it up
Yeah,
because I
he's
want to get the
Caesar.
name. Yeah, he's Caesar. He's Gollum. Damn it, where's the chat when you need him?
I got him.
You
Andy
got him.
Serkis.
Andy Serkis. Thank you so much. When Andy Serkis says you're just a child in a mask, that's how we all felt about Kylo Ren in Episode 7.
Yeah,
right.
Throwing those tantrums, chopping up the computer terminals.
Just an emo bitch. Like, stop, stop it. And Snoke calls him out on it, and I think that was the moment that I think we all, because he responded to it in a way that was honestly much like we would expect. He went and had a tantrum and broke the mask, but like, I agree. Like, he became almost a pitiful character, and when and the proof in the pudding there is when Luke beats him, and he realizes it, and we as an audience realize it. You're like, oh man, like he fell for it, and so did I, and that was the connection that you had with him, right? We wanted to make fun of him when he was shouting more and more, and just want, like, because he was being a petulant child. He was being a brat, just like, keep firing. And when Luke beats him, it's, you almost feel bad for him. And that's brilliant writing. That's brilliant work. Yes, and TWK says, I also think Johnson had Kylo break the mask to separate Kylo from Vader. And again, Rise of Skywalker freaking missed the boat on that one, but we'll get to that one in just a couple minutes. Let's talk a little bit about, I mean, we can talk about the bad, but, you know, look, I do think, I think you can make a great argument that Canto Bite was a great idea that just failed miserably. People want to say that Rose was a wasted character. She wasn't. She just wasn't used well enough. I've said it before. I would have preferred, this is my sort of my alternate story version. Instead of Canto Bite, I would have sent Poe and Finn along to Crate to do some, you know, some reconnaissance and sort of build that character. I'd rather see a relationship between Poe and Finn, and I'm not even talking about a romantic relationship. I would have liked to have seen that relationship grow a little bit. And I also feel like, you know, some of the last bit of bad from that was, I just really feel like that relationship was not built. They didn't take, I mean, you knew that Finn and Poe had a great admiration for each other. But I would have liked to have seen that grow just a little bit.
Yeah.
But we can get into the controversy, because that's where The Last Jedi really has become a lightning rod. Let's talk about the things that people bitch about. The Leia Mary Poppins moment. I just read a quote today. J.J. Abrams was like, not J.J., Rian Johnson was like, I don't see a problem with it. I don't see a problem with it. Is it weird? A little bit. Did I think Leia was going to die at that moment because Carrie had passed away at that point? Would it have made sense to do that? Probably. That might have been the right moment to let her go. It's unfortunate, but I mean, I hate to say it that way. It sounds so heartless. Because she just came back and she really didn't do much for the rest of the movie. But the Mary Poppins moment doesn't. People love to call back to that. I don't care about that. It's,
guess what? There's precedent. Kanan did it in Rebels. He got sucked out of a ship. He flew back in. It's force power. It's the ability to protect yourself that other people don't have. Pull the force around you, whatever it is. Not that big a deal.
Yep. Snoke's death did not bother me. In fact, Chris Ryans, who may or may not be still with us, I saw him in the chat before. Chris, I agree with Chris. Chris laughed when it happened, and he should, because honestly, it was fantastic. Again, we didn't need Snoke's backstory. We don't need it. We still don't need it. he didn't matter. He was the bad guy. He was the emperor in the Return of the Jedi. Nobody knew that he was a senator from Naboo that was secretly trying to take over the galaxy. It didn't matter. He was just the emperor. And I think that's lost on a number of people.
Just a quick second.
We're gonna take a quick long break, and when we come back, we're gonna talk about the controversy from Last Jedi, and then for those of you who have heard me talk about how I have some issues with the Rise of Skywalker, we are going to get into that. But right now, we're going to take a break, and we'll be back with more Sequel Trilogy: The Good, the Bad, and the Controversy.